Welcome to the Pennsylvania Association's webinar on documents with no notary wording. We anticipate this webinar should take about 45 minutes of your time. Before we get started with the webinar, we are going to play a video, and then we'll have the presentation by Brian, and then we'll open it up to question and answers. So we'll get started with a little video on how to use the chat box and the webinar site itself.
Hi there. Welcome to one of Pan's webinars. I'm glad you could join us today. Let's go over a few housekeeping items before we start with the presentation. Before we start, we recommend using Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox for your internet browser when participating in our webinars. Those seem to work best with connection and functionality. If you don't see the chat box on the right-hand side, make sure you click on the 3 white dots in the red box. That will expand the chat box onto your screen. Make sure when you're sending a message in the chat that you set it to send to everybody mode. Also, if you're asking a question, make sure it's set to Q&A mode. Next, you will want to make sure you check out the Files tab. This is where we will have files available to download for you. You can find the files by first making sure you click on the word File. Then, you will click on the up arrow on the right. That will expand the File tab up, where you will see all the available files. The same steps you just did to find the files, you will follow to find the weekly icebreaker poll. This is just a fun poll we like to throw together each week to get the webinar started off on the right foot. You will see at the top of the chat box, in yellow, a sticky note with the instructor shared email address. We will put this email up usually about 10 minutes after the webinar starts. You can email us if your questions didn't get answered. And lastly, if you're having connection issues throughout the webinar, we ask that you do not contact our customer service team. Unfortunately, they cannot assist you when it comes to connection issues in the webinars. What you can do though is, click on the reconnect button at the top of the screen. This usually resolves any lag or freezing of your screen. That wraps up our housekeeping items. Now on to the presentation.
During last week's webinar, we talked about determining which notary act to perform based on the notary wording on the document. Many of you ask what to do if there is no notary wording, and that is this week's topic. So, what does a notary do if there is no notary wording on the document? Can they just add it? Well, it's not quite that straightforward. We're going to use the same handout we used last week, the notary wording one, but this time we're using what I call the flip side, or page 2 of the document. This handout is available for download by clicking on File and then the up arrow under the chat box. As a notary, you can't just add notary wording on your own. The important thing is you ask the customer which notary act they want you to perform. You will describe the different acts without giving any advice or making decisions for the customer. If the customer cannot choose a notary act, refuse to notarize. If the customer can choose a notary act, ask for permission to add or attach the notary wording. Let's look at an example. The Reverend Richard M. Taylor appears and asks for a notarization of this document. The notary shouldn't read the document's content. They should just look for the notary wording. In this case, there is no venue or notary statement. John and Kathy will demonstrate what the conversation might sound like. John is playing the part of Reverend Taylor, and Kathy is Mary Smith, the notary. Let's assume that Mary Smith has demanded personal appearance and identified Richard M. Taylor as the person who should be signing the document.
Reverend Taylor, I can't notarize your document the way it is because there isn't any notary wording on it.
Then how should we proceed?
Well, I can offer you a couple options and allow you to choose the notary act you want. Is that all right?
It is. So what are my options?
There are 3 acts that you can choose from. First is verification on oath or affirmation. This is where you would swear or affirm that the contents of the document are true and sign it in my presence. Or you could choose witnessing or attesting a signature. You would simply sign the document in my presence. Or you could choose an acknowledgement, where I would confirm your understanding and willingness to sign the document, and I would also need to confirm your signature.
I'm not sure. Which one would you choose?
I'm not able to choose for you. If you are unable to decide, then I won't be able to notarize the document.
Okay, then. I choose the option where I'm swearing that the information is true.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the information in the document is true?
I do.
Mary Smith watches Richard Taylor sign the document. This is a requirement for a verification on oath or affirmation. Richard Taylor has chosen verification on oath or affirmation. With Mary's permission, she adds a venue. This indicates the act is taking place in Allegheny County. Also, with Richard's permission, she adds verification on oath or affirmation wording. Keep in mind, this is the notary statement. No one else should be writing or signing in the 2 blank spaces. The first space is for the date of the notarization. The second space is for the customer's name. By signing, Mary will be saying that she administered an oath to and watch Richard M. Taylor sign on July 3rd. Finally, Mary signs, places her official notary stamp, and of course, makes an entry in her journal. We hope you've enjoyed the formal presentation, and now you can feel free to put your questions in the chat box.
Awesome. So thanks, Brian, there. Now is the time, like Brian said, to ask your questions. There is a delay, usually about 10 to 15 seconds on the time you send it to the time it comes over to us. And we did just add our email address up at the top of the screen there. Sandra had a question that came in earlier. She asked, how long does it take to get the email to take the notary test? So it depends, Sandra. Once your application, you finish your education and you send the application along with that certificate in, and then it gets in the state's hands and they approve you and they appoint you as they approve you, the application, which right now they are approving notaries. They are caught up till about mid-June right now when they're receiving the application. So they caught up pretty quick. Once they approve you, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for you to get the email to take that exam, to schedule it. That is, you need to schedule the exam and actually go to a testing center in person. So it just depends on how quickly they approve you, then 2 to 3 weeks after that.
Okay. Christine asks, is it true the venue is not to be added to Department of Transportation documents such as titles? That is true. Normally a venue is required in the notary statement, the notary statement and the venue is required, but PennDOT's a little bit different. So titles for PennDOT do not require the venue.
And question from Judy, must you include the words that are in parentheses in the notary wording? Not sure exactly what she's talking about. I'd actually have to look at the handout really quickly here. And I don't, yeah. Let me take a look here quickly. I think I know what she's talking about.
The affirmed part?
Oh, I see what she's saying. Like for a verification on oath or affirmation where it says signed and sworn to or affirmed before me on by, do you really have to include the word affirmed? I suppose no. If the person actually did formally take an oath. If they didn't formally take an oath, you could change it to signed and affirmed before me. It isn't a problem to leave both, though, because that is the sufficient wording that is listed in Rulona. Thank you, John.
Oh, you got it. Gene asked, the wording you showed is much shorter than the usual affirmation statement. This is sufficient. So, like Brian mentioned, the notary law Rulona for a verification on oath, that is the notary statement, signed and sworn or affirmed before me on a date by your customer. That's what's required by the notary law. Some of us are used to the old affidavit wording, which read sworn to and subscribed before me on a day, month, and year. That's the only part that's required. I know there's wording after. Sometimes it says in hereof or in witness, and there's like a long statement. That's not actual part of the notary statement. So the little snippet that we covered today is what's required for the notary act itself.
And Devin asks, if there's no room to write in the notary wording, can you attach a separate page with the appropriate language, notary signature, and etc.? If there is absolutely no room on the document for the notary wording, yes, you can attach a separate page. When doing that, make sure the notary statement is all together, the venue, the statement, and your signature and stamp. Attach it with a staple, and on the top of the attachment page, put attached to in the title of the document, and on the document, put see attached notary wording on the bottom of it.
And Benjamin wants to know, are rubber stamps available for use when no notary wording is presented on the document? Yes, Benjamin. We have a venue stamp that's available from PAN and 3 others. We have one for verification on oath or affirmation, one for witnessing or attesting a signature, and also one for acknowledgement. Now, the statements for the notary wording are from Rulona, not the old-fashioned wording that was for example, available for an affidavit or the paragraph for an acknowledgement.
Andrea asked, if the venue is not listed anywhere, you have to write out the entire wording. First line, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Second line, county of whatever county you're in. And that's what she's asking. You are correct, Andrea. With your customer's permission, you want to make sure you add that venue on there. That is your responsibility as the notary to make sure the venue is on the document and it's correct. You can write it on. You could stamp it on. You could type it on. But you're responsible to get it on there. And it's important that the venue reflects where the notarization is actually taking place, which you are correct there.
Okay, Elaine asks, if your customer gives you a hard time about the notary wording and they don't know what to choose, and they want the notary to choose it, you can always refuse to, in fact, in this case, you should refuse to notarize then that statement. If you choose it for them, you would be offering legal advice, and we are not allowed to do that. So please do not choose for the customer. It is their choice.
Okay, next question, very, very short. What wording should I add when making a certified copy? I don't have it right in front of me. If you would send an email to instructors@notary.org, we can grab that statement for you and send that to you via email. Again, that email should appear at the top of the chat box in yellow. Now, since that was short, I'll take Samantha as well. If someone creates their own document and asks about notary wording, and we allowed to give them options, can they add their own wording to their own document? I don't see why not, Samantha, if it turns out that it works that way, but ultimately you're asking them what they want. They're making a choice. So I would say that it's your responsibility to add the venue and the statement depending on their choice. But if they do it, I don't think it's a big deal.
Christine asked, if there's no notary wording in the document that we use as the example, then why is it being notarized? Customers requesting it. There are plenty of documents out there that the customer wants notarized for one reason or another. We don't know, but does not have notary wording. It could be a homemade document. It could be a document from a company. We don't know, but as the notary, that's not our responsibility. We're just responsible to scan that document over. We don't care what the document pertains, the information in there. We're just scanning it over for blanks and our notary wording, which consists of the venue and one of the notary statements. If your customer wants it notarized, they just need to tell you what act they want if there's not a statement on it.
Okay, Sandy asked me, I use my company's letterhead for the notarized statement. And I do not see why that would be a problem. As long as the notary statement is on there and the venue is on there. And if it's an attached document, you write in attached to the name of the document and see attached notary wording. But I do not see a problem using company's letterhead.
Gwen's asking a very broad question. What would happen if I made a mistake in one of these instances? I really don't know what kind of mistake you're making. Is it a mistake on the document? Is it a mistake in how you recorded it in your journal? You need to be a little more specific for me to answer that question, Gwen. So you can either ask again in the chat box or send an email.
Andrea asked, so what if you did not write? I don't know exactly what you're asking, Andrea. I'm going to assume you're asking what it's saying is if you didn't write the venue and the statement on there. That's how I'm going to take the question. If I'm wrong, please correct me in the chat box, Andrea. So if you didn't, in that scenario that me and Kathy and Brian, we went over, if you just signed the document and stamped your stamp on with no venue and no notary statement, that's not a notary act. You didn't do anything for your customer. Potentially, if the document, would come into question or go to get recorded, there is a chance that you could be asked about the document. You could be questioned. You could even be penalized. Those are always options. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I just want to let you know what could possibly happen.
Okay, Sharon has the old stamp. It says sworn and subscribed before me on this day of blah, 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 2020. Did I understand correctly that this stamp would no longer be able to use for Rulona wording? That is the old wording. If it's on a document, it's fine to use that wording, but when you're adding to a document, you should use the newer Rulona wording.
And Kathy asked, can you type the wording on a label and affix it to the document? There's nothing in the notary law and nothing in the proposed regulations that prevent that. But I'm going to tell you that PAN does not recommend that you do that. The simple reason is labels can be pasted on. Labels can also be easily pulled off.
All right, so a question came in. Should the venue be Commonwealth of PA and it can't be state? Either one is accepted. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, though, the state does prefer to see Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So if I'm adding it on the document, I'm going to go ahead and write or stamp Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Make sure you're not putting PA. You want to spell out Pennsylvania. That's also key. But if my document reads State of Pennsylvania, I'm going to leave the word state. It's not going to get me in trouble for any reason. But just make sure you are spelling out Pennsylvania.
And Stephanie has a similar question to the one to Sharon's. She has the sworn and scribed to before me stamp. Is it still acceptable and correct? Really, you should have the newer Rulona. If you're adding to the documents, you should have the newer stamp.
And she asked, do you want to take that one because it was short?
I'll take that one too.
All right.
So short. When notarizing for elderly people whose driver's license have long ago expired, what shall we do? Well, that's no longer a valid ID. You should have to have a valid ID to identify the person, which would be a current driver's license or a current government issued identification. Do they have a current passport they could use? Or even the Social Security card, which doesn't have the picture on it, but you could use the driver's license expired as a backup. But the Social Security card does not have an expired date on it. So you cannot use the expired driver's license for identification purposes, Jen.
All right. So I am going to pick up on Anne Marie's question and Catherine's question as well. Anne Marie says that the venue is typed in, but is a different county. Can you cross it out and write the correct county? And yes, in fact, you should do that, Anne Marie. Again, the venue's purpose is to describe where the notarization is taking place. Catherine wants to know, do you have the explanation of the different acts available in a handout? Yes, we do. If under the chat box you click on the word file and the up arrow to the right, there is a handout called Notary Wording, which you may have from last time around. It's actually the second page or the back of the Notary Wording handout.
All right, so I'm going to take Andrea and Gwen. Andrea, she says, so what happens if you did not write Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and you only wrote County of, wherever it was, on an official document? It's a document not officially notarized. I can't tell you exactly what would happen. I wish I could see into the future. That was our poll question. Is it officially notarized? I can't say one way or another. I'm going to tell you what the notary law states, which needs that the document, when you are notarizing, it needs to have a venue, which it says Commonwealth or State of Pennsylvania and the county where it's happening. If it's an internal document where it's just staying in the company, honestly, just from my experience, I don't think anything's going to come about of it. Now, if it's going to go down to the recorder and it's going to be recorded for public record, there's a good chance that they're going to reject the document because it doesn't meet the requirements. So it really just depends. And then Gwen asked, what would be considered a mistake when adding wording to a document? I thought the objective was to notarize the signature. That is a very big misconception amongst a lot of notaries, Gwen. A lot of notaries think we simply just notarize our customer's signature, which is not the case. We're responsible to make sure the customer's in front of us. We need to ID them properly. We need to make sure they're in the right state of mind and they want to participate in that transaction. What you're responsible to do as a notary depends on what act's being asked for. So that handout that Brian went over, there's 3 main acts that you're going to have responsibilities for. Verification on oath, where you need to give your customer an oath and watch them sign in your presence. An acknowledgement, where they need to verbally confirm to you they knew what they were doing and they wanted to do it. And then signature witnessing, which is kind of what you're describing, where you're just watching the customer sign. But there are different acts for the notary.
Can I piggyback on that?
Absolutely.
Just to mention that in our files documents, we do have the notary responsibilities document you can download, and that goes through exactly what John was just saying. And Karen asks about what about documents that don't have enough space for the notary stamp. You can stamp in the margins vertically. Anywhere where there's space, you try to fit that notary stamp in there and your signature. It is not as long as the stamp is legible, you can put it vertically in the margins of the document. And if there's absolutely no space, you can add an attachment to the document with the notary's statement, venue, and your stamp.
All right. Next question. They want us to confirm the notary statements. So I'm looking at the Notary Wording handout, which is available for you to download. For verification on oath or affirmation, the proper wording from Rulona is signed and sworn to or affirmed before me on whatever date the notarization took place by the name of the person you are notarizing for. For an acknowledgement, the proper wording from Rulona is this record was acknowledged before me on whatever the date of the notarization is by the name of the person that you are notarizing for. And finally, for witnessing or attesting a signature, signed or attested before me on whatever date the notarization is taking place by the name of the person you are notarizing for.
All right. So Alyssa asked, what if the customer does not present all pages of the document and only presents you with the page to be notarized? Alyssa, yeah, if there's not the full document there, I will not notarize. Your responsibility is when you notarize the document, that should be the last thing that's done to it. Nothing should be added to it in your portion when you're notarizing for the customer. If the other portions of the document don't pertain to what you're notarizing, I don't see, maybe it wouldn't be a big issue. But if the documents information pertains to what you're notarizing, I would make sure all the pieces are there before I do the notarization. And if it's a multiple page document, it should be stapled. Don't have them use a paper clip or a binder clip where they can remove and insert pages at their own will.
And Don asked, does a separate page make the document invalid? No, but you do want to, if you're having the notarization on an attached page, have it stapled to the document, not paper clip, because you could remove them. You want them attached as best as possible. You
want to cross-reference each to the other too, as you had described before. Karen wants to know, in a case where you find a blank space on the document while scanning, what can you do? Well, it depends on where the blank space is, Karen. If the blank space is in the customer's portion of the document, what we recommend is, first of all, if it remains blank, the law says you can't notarize. You can bring it to your customer's attention. They can fill it in with information. They can write NA or none or draw lines. But once the blank spaces are filled in, then you can notarize. If the blank spaces are in your portion of the document, the notary wording, you want to make sure that those spaces get filled in as well.
All right. So what is the wording for copies, and can we add that to the Rolona types as well? There is a notary statement for certified copies. Like Brian said earlier, though, we don't have that on hand. We would just need to grab that from the notary law. So if you are curious of what that is, please send us an email at the top of the screen there at instructors@notary.org. We'll be glad to get that out to you.
Okay, and sometimes I see place seal here. I do not have the seal. I only have the new stamp. Do I get a seal, or does a new stamp make the seal no longer necessary? The seal that they're talking about is actually the notary stamp itself. The crimping tool or the embossing tool is no longer necessary in Pennsylvania. It's nice to have, but you do not have to have that on the document.
I'm going to take one more before I need to drop off and then stay in the chat room. Patricia asked about the exam. I'm on oxygen and I carry my portable. Will they allow me to carry it in? She got her email, and can she take her exam anytime now? First question about the oxygen, I'm going to have to assume yes, but I don't know how they're going to treat that. So go to their website before you schedule the exam. See if there are any type of limitations or if there are any kind of rules you need to follow. If not, you could potentially call the testing center and ask. As far as scheduling the exam, once you've gotten the email from Pearson VUE inviting you to take the exam, you can go to their website, create an account, and schedule that exam anytime you'd like.
All right, so I'm going to take Kathy and Elaine here. Kathy says, if my oath affirmation stamp is old style, does Pan have the new wording stamp so I can order a new one? If so, how do I order? Kathy, we do have those available on our website. What I'm going to ask Brian Crocker to do, since he is in the chat room, he will put the link in the chat box for our products and our stamps, and it will take you right to the stamp that you are looking for. Elaine asked, and we only notarize, are we only notarizing in the county where our notary office is? Can we notarize anywhere in PA, but just not another state? You can, as a Pennsylvania notary, Elaine, you can notarize in all 67 counties in Pennsylvania. You're not limited to the county where you're commissioned out of. Your commission is valid for the entire state. You are correct, though. Once you would step foot outside of Pennsylvania, you cannot notarize in that outside state. But if somebody from an outside state would come here in Pennsylvania and visit you, because you and the customer are both standing in Pennsylvania, you could notarize that document. You just want to make sure the venue reflects where the notarization is happening.
And Anurada just asked about that. If a person's from another state, can they get notarized in Pennsylvania? John just answered that. Yes, if you're in Pennsylvania. So he's taking all the questions.
Didn't even realize.
With the stamp question, I was asking if there's no space, can you use the back of the paper or do you have to attach a separate document? I suppose you could use the back of the paper, but make sure that the stamp, the notary statement, and the venue are all in the same area on the document itself.
Yeah, I'll just say, I know it's the state prefers if everything's on the same page. What PAN recommends, though, because it doesn't say whether or not you can use the back of a page, what we're going to teach you as a best business practice, what Kathy said earlier, it's safer to do an attachment. You do run the risk if it's on the back of the page, maybe the stamp seeping through, making things illegible.
That's true.
So you're running a risk. Could you do it? There's no law that says you can't, but would we recommend it? Probably not. It might be safer to use the attachment. Mary says, new notary test pending. What if a document has multiple pages? Would you just notarize the last page? Would the number of pages be noted anywhere? It would depend on the style document, who created the document. If there's going to be numbered pages, that's not really, you wouldn't have any idea. What you're looking for, Mary, is the page that has your venue, your statement, where you're going to sign, where you're going to place your stamp. That's the page you're looking for. You are scanning through the other pages, though, to make sure there are no blanks left in the portions, because you don't want to notarize and then they leave and fill the information in later at a later date.
Barbara has an error on her notary public bond and oath. It reads Iowa instead of Pennsylvania. If you are a PAN member, you can contact the customer service agents and they will help you fix that or lead you in the right direction. If you're not, you should contact your bonding company.
Barbara, let me piggyback off that. The only reason I know this is because when I started at PAN my first year or so, I was a customer service rep. That is normal. Our bonding company is from the state of Iowa. That is okay, just showing from where the bonding company's from. But the actual note, the verbiage and everything on your bond is going to have a venue and it's going to have the correct Pennsylvania notary wording. So if you got your bond from PAN, I wouldn't be concerned about that. It's Merchants Bonding Company. They're based out of Iowa. I just know that. Just no worries. Yeah, I just know that from being in the office. Christine, right? Who was the individual that decided to change everything to the Rolona rules? That's the Pennsylvania Department of State. It was not. We don't have any say on that. We just teach the law. We don't have any say on it. But that is the Pennsylvania Department of State. If you have any questions or issues regarding the law, you could definitely bring that up to them.
Okay, and Elaine asked about notarizing in any county of Pennsylvania or only the county where our office is. You are bound by the state of Pennsylvania only. You can notarize in any county in Pennsylvania, as long as the venue describes where the notary act is taking place.
Easy enough. Kate asked, what if the blank space is for a third party? The customer filled in their section, and that is where we're affirming, attesting, etc. Kate, yeah, as long as you're sure that the customer's portion, which you're notarizing, your customer's portion, there's no blanks left in that. There could be other portions in the later on in the document that could be for a third party, and they're going to have notarized at a separate date. That's okay. Because that's going to be notarized later on. But your portion, what you're notarizing that day, when you look through that customer's portion, there should be no blanks left. So that just depends. You want to scan that part.
And Sharon says, PAN used to have documents with written notary wording on that could be printed to attach to the documents. Do you still have these? Yes, in the member portal, there are in, I believe it's forms in the member portal. But yeah, they are on the website, the pannotary.org website there, Sharon.
Yeah, right under PAN forms, you just log in and you're going to see a plethora of forms there. Yeah, and they're PDF fillables, which are kind of nice. Make your life a little bit easier. Beth asked, I notarize a lot of documents that go out of state. I've been using both my stamp and crimping seal for these. Should I continue to do so? Beth, that is a great idea. Like Kathy mentioned earlier, the embossing seal is not required when you're notarizing documents as a Pennsylvania notary. But if you have documents that are going to an outside state, it's a really good idea. It's not required, but it's a good idea to use the embossing seal on documents that are going out of state. The reason being, there's a lot of states that still recognize the embossing seal, and they might send it back to you and ask you to put it on. So it just saves you a little bit of time and hassle. If you have it, go ahead and throw it on if it's going out of state. But again, your stamp needs to go on too.
Yes. Stephanie is asking about the embossing seal too. Is it necessary? And should you get one to appease your coworkers? Well, I don't know about the second part of the question, to appease your coworkers. It is not required in the state of Pennsylvania. However, other states and other countries, if your documents are going to other countries, they do like to see the embossing seal. So depending on where your documents go, it may not be a bad idea to get the embossing seal and crimp the paper.
And Brian did put the link there for the notary stamps, for the notary wording. It's a whole list of stamps that we do offer and embossing seals, so check that out if you need to. Elaine came in and says, I was temporarily knocked off the webinar, so I don't know if it was already answered. If the customer tried to give you a hard time wanting the notary to choose the statement, we should be firm and not choose the wording and not notarize a document. Is that correct? You are 100% correct, Elaine. Do not choose for them, even if they're trying to peer pressure you. Even if they say, well, you're the notary, you'll know better than I would. Just pick one. You can't pick for them unless you're an attorney. If you're an attorney, you can choose the act. But just as a notary, we can't pick the act. That'd be giving out legal advice, practicing law without a license. So you could suggest for them to go back to who created the document. They might have a better idea, or they can talk to an attorney. But end of the day, refuse to notarize if they can't choose.
Cynthia says, if you're notarizing in a county other than the county you are registered in, which county do you insert in the document? Well, the county that you insert in the venue of the document is where the notarization is actually taking place. So if you are registered in Allegheny County, but you happen to be in York County during the Notary Act, then you would put York County in the venue. So if your venue is, as John always says, look down at your feet, wherever that Notary Act is taking place, put that in the venue, no matter
Simple,
what it says.
Yeah, it's simple enough, but it will stick. Yeah, look down at your feet. Exactly that, Kathy. Denise says, if a document has check boxes for a client to check the appropriate ones, must the client make a mark indicating that the non-check boxes are not to be used? That's not required, Denise. I mean, if you want them to, that's fine. What the notary law addresses is blank lines, like blank spaces, which can consist of information being entered. There's going to be spots where, boxes could be checked. I wouldn't worry about that, so to say, Denise. I would just worry about the blank spots, like the blank lines.
Denise asks a question about the stamping on the back of a page. What if it contains two-sided pages? Then you are definitely going to want to attach the notary wording to the document. And remember, when creating an attachment, you want to cross-reference, put the title of the document on top of the notary statement, and then on the document put "See attached notary wording" and affix them with a staple.
All right, Sherry asks, if I don't renew my commission after it expires, is there a place for me to go to destroy my stamp, etc., or what do I do with it? There's not a place for you to destroy it, Sherry. I always tell people, have fun with it. You want to make sure that you press your stamp up so you can get the rubber part off that has all your information. You want to deface that, either cut it up or slash it up. And then you want to smash up the other part of the stamp with a hammer. It always makes a good chew toy for the dog. Make sure the ink's out first. Run it over with your car. Have fun with it. When you don't plan on renewing or you resign as a notary, you're retired, you want to make sure you also take any logbooks that you've kept over the years, and you're going to send them or turn them in to the recorder of deeds where you last maintained an office of record. that is required by notaries when you resign or retire.
Joanne says, my notary expires in August. I still have not received my appointment letter or bond. Do I need to worry, or how do I check when I receive to finish renewing? I'm assuming that you have applied already, sent in your education and application for renewal. I know they were backed up, but they have caught up with renewing the registration. So you should be getting that anytime soon. John, do you know where to check on that for her?
So what I would recommend, Joanne, is, especially if you're a member with us, contact customer service, because what they're going to do is pull you up on the state's website. And the main part is, as long as you sent your application in, you took the education, you should be okay, but you're going to be in the process. The state was backed up with the pandemic, but they can go on the state's website and see if your application's been accepted, it's been reviewed. You could have been appointed and your bonds be coming in a few weeks. Give customer service a call, Joe, and they're going to be able to help you out there. Jill came in, said, I've had documents that have the correct wording and requires my stamp. Then there were pages that follow that only had a seal line at the bottom. Do I just place my stamp there, or will I need to add the additional wording? Yeah, Jill, so anytime you need to place your notary stamp down, you need to also have correct notary wording along with it, which includes another venue and another notary statement. So yeah, once you fill out the first one, you can't just place your stamp down throughout the rest of the documents without any wording. If your stamp's required, there needs to be a notary act associated with it. They go hand in hand. So one of the statements need to be there. And if it's not on there, make sure your customer lets you know which one they want.
Anna Rada asks, where can I find your email for copy wording? I just reposted it at the top, instructors at notary.org, and it should show up there in 10 to 15 seconds if you can't see it already, but it's instructors at notary.org.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say the sticky note went away, so we'll have Brian maybe put it up there one more time just to play it safe, and then there it is. Perfect. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Brian. So we got a question here. Carrie, can I purchase an embossing seal from Pan? Yeah, the link that Brian sent earlier, if you scroll down through the chat box, it says notary stamps. That's going to take you to stamps and seals. The embossing seals will be there, so you could check that out. And then Kathy just came in. I'll take Kathy's really quick. My embossing seal is worn out and is barely visible. Kathy, Pan, if you got your embossing seal from Pan within the past 20 years, I always tell them it will be in our system, because Pan offers a lifetime warranty on their products. Call in the customer service, and they should be able to send you out a replacement. So just give them a call.
Randy's notarizing a document, and the signer is someone from outside of the company. Who is listed as the customer? I need to know to list the ID details. The customer, I guess the customer is the person who comes in for the notarization. And when you're doing the ID details, if they've used a driver's license that you use to identify them in the journal, in the ID column, you would put PA driver's license, issue date, and expiration date for that. I believe
all right.
That's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's how I take it too. The signer is going to be the customer. Even though you're notarizing a document for your employer, if somebody's signing outside the company and you're notarizing for them, technically, that's going to be your customer. Aaron asks, if you use the embossing seal, where is the best place to put that? The way we teach it, next to your stamp, close to the notary wording, the best as the document allows. Make sure you're not overlapping your embossing seal with your stamp. That's a misconception amongst a lot of notaries, especially notaries that have been doing notary work for a long time. They like to put their embossing seal over the impression of the stamp. That's a no-go, yeah, because the stamp impression needs to be clear and legible, so that makes it illegible. So put it close to the stamp, but not overlapping anything. Do the best you can there.
Donna asks, is it a conflict of interest to notarize documents for family members? It is if you are involved with the as a benefit from the document. So if it's a will for a family member and you are the beneficiary of the will, then yes, that would be a conflict of interest. But in general, no, you cannot notarize for your spouse. But for other family members, if you have nothing to do with the document, it should be fine to notarize.
All right. So for copies, am I right? We don't need the customer's signature. Yeah, I was gonna say for a certified copy, that's what I'm guessing you're asking for. For when it comes to a certified copy, what the notary's responsibility is simply this: you're making an exact copy of what was brought to you. You're going to go ahead and then add the venue, add the notary statement for a certified copy, which again, we will let you know what it is if you email us. That's something we said we would research for the few people to ask about certified copies. Then you're going to sign it and you're going to stamp it. Yeah, your customer is not going to be signing anywhere.
Okay, a question, was not sure if they answered, they might have fallen off. Where do I go to get my instruments destroyed, or do I do it myself? You will be destroying your notary stamp yourself, and make sure it is illegible. Cut it up, scratch it out with an X-Acto knife, but you are doing that after your commission expires yourself.
All right, Debbie asks, if the venue area has the wrong month already typed on it, is it okay to draw a line through it and handwrite the correct month on? So the venue reflects where the notarization is happening. It says Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, County of, and then whatever county you're in. So I think you might be talking about the notary statement, perhaps, where it says it has the actual date in there. And if the date's already typed up in there beforehand and it's the incorrect date, you definitely can put a single line through. I would initial it and put the correct date on there. Absolutely, Debbie.
Kathy's just giving some information about her expiration. She just received her bond and information last week, so they are still going out. And there's more information from Cheryl on the expiration and when they're getting it. If the venue area is the wrong month, we just answered that.
Mm-hmm.
So the signer is the client, and by client or notary, I'm sometimes which is the client of mine. I mean, the on is the date, and by would be the client or the signer that you put that on, and you write in the client's name in that space, Christine.
Exactly. Yeah. Easy way to remember it. It's called the notary statement. That's how you determine what act you're working with. So as my notary statement, I'm required to fill that in. So you fill in the date and then by who's doing the steps that statement's asking for. Well, your customers are doing those steps. So you want to make sure you hand print their name in there. That's an easy way I remember it because it can be confusing. I agree, Christine. We got a whole bunch of thank you. So I think some people are dipping out. You're welcome. I always tell people, make sure you stay safe and stay healthy out there if I don't get a chance to say that at the end. Thank you for stopping. Andrea says these sessions are much more helpful than the classes we're required to take. Andrea, we try to do our best. It seems like this is a very common topic we get. Even our customer service team says they get a lot of calls about this stuff. So this is great that we have this platform to help you out. Ryan asks, he says, I might have missed this if this was asked, but what if the notary wording is on the document, but there's no room for the official stamp or seal? So Ryan, yeah, you need to do the best you can. Kathy mentioned earlier, you can place a stamp vertical in the margins. The way the law reads, you want to make sure you have a clean impression. Shouldn't be overlapping anything. Do the best you can. If you need to, if there's absolutely no room for it, you can add on an attachment the notary wording. So your venue, your statement, then your stamp and signature. But we only recommend doing attachments when there's absolutely no room.
Okay, Kathy is talking about the certified copy wording stamp, and she's just ordered one. So others, there is one if you'd like to get that. That's information for others. Kathleen asked about a new journal, and that is also on our products page. Pam sells the journals. So if you go to, there was a link here earlier to the products page, you can also get a new journal. And Iris asked, did you say I can notarize for a relative? When asked before, if you have the same last name, it will be flagged. Is it okay to notarize for a family member?
Let me take this one, Kathy.
Okay.
So when it comes to notary, you can notarize for anyone as long as you don't have a direct financial interest. When it comes to your spouse, you or your spouse can have a direct or financial interest, but family, as long as you're not getting anything out of it, you can. Now, when it comes to PennDOT paperwork, this is something you might be referring to, Iris. That's why I just wanted to grab it just in case, because PennDOT, I've heard a lot of stories where PennDOT will reject paperwork if the last names match, even though you're not related. That's something to look out for. Maybe send a statement along with your paperwork to PennDOT, letting them know you're not related. But if you're not PennDOT and you're just doing regular notarizations, it doesn't matter if you have the same last name. You can do it as long as you don't have a direct or financial interest.
Okay, a lot of thank yous coming in.
Tons of thank
Thank you, Eileen. We love doing these, so thank you all.
Thanks, Cheryl. Cheryl says she loves my pop figures behind me. Thank you. The collection
Happy
grows
4th
by
of
the
July.
week. Yeah, happy 4th, everybody. See a whole bunch of thank yous. We answered all the questions up to this point.
Right.
Yeah, usually they go about 45 minutes to an hour, so we're at 51 minutes, so we're right on track here.
Okay. Just give it a few more seconds to see if we come in. Any more questions come in?
Debbie asked, do we have to take a special PAN class to be able to notarize titles? So Debbie, if you're just going to notarize a title, like for the seller, you can go ahead and notarize it. As a Pennsylvania notary, you're allowed to notarize anything that's required notarization. Now, PAN's going to recommend, I strongly recommend, not touching Pennsylvania titles unless you're extremely familiar with them or you're a PennDOT agent. The reason being, one tiny mistake on it could deface the title and cost your customer money to get a new one. It could cost them the whole sale. So what we do is on our YouTube page, we have a video. It talks about how to transfer a Pennsylvania title. Go ahead and watch that and see how detailed it is. Because just as a notary, you can notarize the title, but that doesn't mean you can transfer the title for the customer. They're going to need to go to an agent to still complete the forms necessary and send it off to PennDOT. So it's safe and easiest just for them to go to the agent and have it all done at the same time. Brian said we need a John Rensel pop. They made custom pops, by the way. We had one made for my buddy for he was inducted into his Football Hall of Fame. We had one made and it was awesome. And so maybe that's always a possibility, Brian.
A lot of thank yous.
And then Kathy asked, just looked at the website to get a new embosser. Is there any way to just order the plates since there's nothing wrong with the crimper? Kathy, call customer service. They might be able to do something for you, or they might just be able to get you a replacement, especially if it's through us. Our products are guaranteed for life. So call customer service, Kathy. They should be able to help you out.
Jill hopes this continues after the pandemic. It's more helpful this way. We plan on doing these for, I don't know when we're stopping, but they are helpful. We find them useful. We'll be back to teaching again after the pandemic. So it might not happen as often, but we plan on continuing this forum.
All right. Catherine asked, I do not notarize very often. Are there any refresher courses available? Definitely check out our YouTube page, Catherine. And also, if you're a member, log into the member portal on our website and check out the tutorials. Tons of tutorials just over general notarizations on a specific act, your responsibilities. But yeah, between the YouTube page and our member portal under tutorials, a lot of good information. And Brian did put that link for the video. So I thank you, Brian, there. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're putting videos out there almost on a weekly basis. Keep you up to date on other tutorials or how-tos. We do, try to update as much as we can.
And Donna asked for that YouTube video, and Brian has posted the link if you scroll up in the chat box. Barbara asked question about DMV questions on the notary test. There are not.
No.
The notary test is just notary.
Alyssa said a coworker just took the notary exam. She had to remove all of her jewelry at the testing center. May I still wear my wedding bands? Alyssa, unfortunately, that is a question I cannot answer. That is going to be a question for the third-party company, Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE is the company that conducts the exams, and they have their own set of rules when you enter their building. So that is something you might want to contact whoever you schedule through, whatever Pearson VUE center you go to, and ask them beforehand, because you might not feel comfortable locking that up. You might not want to wear it the day of.
I do know when I went for the Pearson, they made me take my glasses off, and they examined the glasses, I don't know, to see if there was any answers written on the frames or to see if they were Google glasses, I guess. I couldn't look anything up. So they are very serious about what you can and cannot take into there.
Somebody asked one big problem with titles. One big problem with titles are when people are donating their car and the buyer is not present. What do you do for the buyer's signature? So if you're the notary and you're just notarizing the seller's portion, the buyer doesn't need to be there, but the buyer's information needs to be in there. So in Section A, when you're signing on the back, there's a spot for the seller. They're going to fill out information and they're going to sign it. And then over on the right-hand side, there's a portion for the buyer. The buyer does not need to be there when Section A is being completed, but the information needs to be filled in there. Their name and address. So that is something that's okay. Now, when it's going to be transferred to them on the front in Section D, they do need to be present.
And a lot more thank yous coming in. And thank you all. And we'll give it just another 10, 15 seconds to make sure no last minute questions do come in. And then we will shut down for the day.
And keep in mind, I'm just looking because I have my work computer over here and I'm using my personal one for this. We got about 20, looks like about 24 emails from webinar participants. So bear with us. We usually respond within the business day or so. We do have a second webinar today. It's the same webinar. But if we don't get back to you today, we'll get back to you as soon as we can with those questions.
Is it worth looking into RON at this time? Remote online notarization. Well, we are still in the COVID process, and the RONs will be allowed for 60 days after the emergency stops. So that's a decision for you to make. Takes time to sign up with the online vendors, and there is an expense for that. So those are things to consider when you are making that type of decision.
So I'm going to answer Kathleen's question, and we'll wrap it up here. So Kathleen just said, I went for her card agent class and I've not sent it in. Is there a time period? Your motor vehicle education is good for 2 years. When you take it that day, the time starts and it's going to end 2 years after that. You need to take education every 2 years. So you can go ahead and start the process. But then, whenever the expiration date on that certificate, that's when you're going to need to take more education.
Okay,
all right,
we'll wrap it up here. Yeah, have a happy and safe 4th of July.
Everybody, stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks for joining us today. We will not be doing them tomorrow because PAN is closed tomorrow for the holiday. We will get back to you next week. Same topic next week as well, but you're more than welcome to join us for the Q&A. I think that's usually the most beneficial part. A lot of people take away is the Q&A. So, take care, stay healthy, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.